So we are here today and we're doing kind of an AMA with Sabrina Macias and Audrey. Both have been in PR for a while and have experienced what it is to be a woman in the industry, not only from a multicultural perspective of being like Hispanic or from Argentina, like Sabrina, but also just a woman and how the difficulties, the successes, how it is every day, and how you battle the trials and tribulations that come to you. So can you, Sabrina, give us like a background of how you started in PR?
Sure. I guess I moved to New York when I was 23. Well, actually, even a step before that, I went to school in Toronto. I studied mass communications and journalism with a Spanish minor because I thought the Spanish would be easy, which it wasn't. I spent a lot of time reading a lot of Spanish history books. So I learned an appreciation for the language for sure. And throughout that time, I had traveled to New York a couple of times and really fell in love with the city and felt like, wow, I definitely need to be there at some point in my life. I was living in Toronto at the time, or a small town named Brampton in Canada. And then when I went to a music festival in Miami one time, and I met a bunch of record producers. At the time, the Latin music industry was really popular in the US, and I met somebody that was a CEO of, or owner of, a record label that was distributed by Sony, and he was looking for a director of public relations. In Toronto, I had done a lot of entrepreneurial things in kind of journalism, because that's what I was trying to do initially. But then when I had the opportunity to move to New York, he said, I'm looking for a director of public relations. We have X amount of artists, and like, you'll figure it out. Yeah. It was pre 9/11. So all I had to do was, pack up my stuff, cross the border. And at the border, I applied for like a random visa. So I didn't know, like, when I got to the border, if they would actually give me the visa and I would be able to cross. But I had like all the, you had to have like a package of like letters of recommendation and those kinds of things. So I kind of packed up. I told my parents, I got the job offer. I drove to New York and came in for the interview, and on the way home, like when I was driving back to Toronto, I got the job offer. And so I got home. He wanted me to start right away, and I think I got like 3 weeks or something to move to New York. And so I had told my mom, like, okay, well, I'm going to try and get this visa. I'm going to go drive to the border. If I get the visa, I'm going. If not, you'll see me back in like an hour, So I had like this little Jeep Wrangler. And
how old were you?
I was 22, I think.
Oh, wow.
I had one of those Suzuki Sidekicks, like standard.
Yeah.
And so I packed it up with like mostly just my computer and my clothes, really. And I had a cousin that lived in like Elizabeth, New Jersey. And so I told him like, hey, I'm going to come and stay on your couch for a little bit until I figure out the work thing. Yeah. And then eventually when I get enough money, I'll just move out, So I got to the border. I randomly got this visa, which now would be absolutely impossible, but I got lucky and it happened. And then I moved to New York, and I moved in with my cousin, who was actually an illegal immigrant.
Wow.
So he had come to Elizabeth, New Jersey from Uruguay, and there's a big population of Uruguayans in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Who knows why, but I stayed on his couch for what ended up being 3 months, so that was a long time, but anyway, so I started working at this record label, and I was the director of public relations. I didn't really know anybody in New York, or actually in the U.S. at all, but they had this program. I'm trying to remember the name. It was like a contact program where you input people's contacts into the computer. This is like fax machine time. So it's like, and you input people's contacts into the computer, and then it would print out almost like what now version of a like your calendar kind of looks like. So it would be like all the contacts, whatever. So everything we did was via fax. So we would have to print out the contacts and then put a cover page on every contact, and then fax like a press release, let's say.
Yeah.
So I literally, and I'm laughing because Audrey used to tell us when we were at Edelman, like many years later, that she used to come in early and do the fax clips. the clips. You know how you do clipping reports?
Yeah.
So we used to have to do the clipping reports on the fax machine. So like we had to cut the newspaper, get all that stuff.
Yeah, we can't screenshot it anymore.
No, screenshot. You can't even Google search. Like you literally had to go buy the newspapers and get everything.
Physical monitoring.
Physical monitoring.
Wow.
So I would stand at the fax machine for probably like an hour because this is like hundreds of contacts that we would send out. And but at that time we just started using email.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a transition between like the fax and the email. But nobody had like email distro lists or anything like that. You know, it was kind of like you used email just to kind of a little bit communicate, but everything else was done via fax machine. Even like when we sent out our creative to get approved, we would like fax it to the creative person. They would fax it back to us, and then we would mark it up and then fax
send
it
it
back to them.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then you had to
gosh.
stand in front of the fax machine, like waiting for all this transaction to happen.
Making sure it had paper.
Yeah. And color. Like sometimes you need it in color, but then the fax machine was never in color. It's black and white. So then they had to write the name. Like, so this is, you know, cobalt blue or, you know, Pantone colors. So they'd say it's like Pantone color number 321. You know, and then you'd have to go look at the Pantone color and make sure that those were the right colors because it's like a logo or something, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, the CEO of the company and owner at the time, he was kind of going through some things as well. And it was weird. It was a period where he was like, he went through some really personal things and he was like, go, like, do whatever you need to do with these guys, you know? And so I was 22 and I had like 7 artists, music artists that were under my purview. So in addition to public relations, I also like managed their photo shoots and managed their tours and sometimes accepted money for their tours.
And don't you think that's like that hasn't changed, right? Like, do you think like PR nowadays is still the same? Like, it's not just PR?
Right. I think it's like it evolves. Exactly. You realize that PR is everything.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's anything people are asking for. Like naturally you're going to say yes and you're going to figure out how to fill the gap.
Well, but it also reflects the brand, right? Because then I would be like, no, this is the person that I want you to be. You're an artist. So I want your photos to look like this. I want your outfits to look like this. I want your video shoot to look like this. The models, the casting, everything kind of comes back full circle when you're talking about PR. And I think now, you know, fast forward 20 years later, 21 years later, it's the same thing with like social media and your like
personal branding.
Your personal brand. Like everybody, you know, you're taking care of that in a different way, but same idea.
Yeah.
And so I think all along PR has always been that to me. And I think we've been able to apply it across the board as clients give you, you know, tasks and ideas or as you become more creative.
Yeah.
So I had these artists and it was the music business is all men. At the time it was, you know, kind
and
of
how
sleazy.
was that?
Yeah, it was very sleazy. And I say sleazy not in like a female kind of sleazy way, but it was sleazy in like a dirty, grimy kind of like, I remember my first meeting. Remember I'm from Toronto, like Canada, like, you know.
No bad
like,
things happen in Canada.
It's rainbows and unicorns. It's lovely. And the president is like, okay, you need to meet us at this place. It's called Sue's Rendezvous. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, where is it? It's in the Bronx, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. We're meeting like this person and this person. Like, that's what they did. So I get to Sue's Rendezvous and I like see outside there's like a pink lady like on a pole.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm like, this is weird. Like, what? Like, okay. But I thought it was like a really fancy restaurant.
Yeah.
So I go in and, yep, lo and behold, it's a strip joint, you know? And I'm like, okay, I have 2 choices. I can freak out and like make him feel like he totally got me and like made me uncomfortable, or I can just own it and just walk in and be like, yep, I'm in a strip club. What do you guys want to talk about? Let's like get the business over with, you know? Yeah. So I took a deep breath. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Yeah. And I was like, because I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, if my mom knew that I moved to New York to go to strip clubs for meetings, it'd be really bad. Yeah. So I just went in and I had the meeting and there was girls naked all over me. And I just, did the business that I was there to do. I got the information that I needed for my artist. We were about to launch like a new artist record. And that's kind of how everybody did their business. Like they went to strip clubs, they went to concerts, they went to like clubs at the time in New York. It was like the big thing to go to nightclubs. And So I kind of just rolled with it, and I didn't let it bother me. And I feel like, you know, at the time it was probably a little bit intimidating, but at the same time, I do feel like a lot of the experience that I got from going through all of those things has definitely made me, you know, prepared me for like what I went through later in life. And just, I mean, I work at DraftKings, and we spent the last 2 years in like, you know, kind of crisis mode. And I always constantly look back to that time and feel like, wow, if I hadn't have experienced this 10 times over, like I probably wouldn't have been able to manage the situation, you know, this year or last year as I would have if I hadn't have done that. So I'm very grateful for like all of those opportunities, and I think every one of them has been a learning experience for sure. And you know, you kind of just run with it. And I think especially as a woman, you feel like there's all these additional challenges, and my biggest, you know, kind of success tactic for me in those situations is just to kind of level up and like be mature and take it in and not let it phase you, even if you are phased by it and you deal with it at home or somewhere else, but just never in the face of the situation that you're in. I feel like that really helps them kind of, okay, like I'm not phased by it. Are you phased by it? No. All right, let's do what we need to do, you know, and keep it moving. I think that's definitely been like a major learning experience for me, is just like not to, you know, always have your game face on, especially in PR, right? Like people could say really crazy things, or really crazy things can happen when you go through crisis. And I think you always just have to take a deep breath and figure out that like, okay, like how do we solve this? Like, let's not worry about what's happening. Let's worry about like, how are we going to solve it? How are we going to get to the next place? So that was just 1 year.
Wow.
And then, it was crazy. It was a really crazy environment. Lots of crazy things happened. It was also a time where radio stations were being paid to play artists. So I was involved in all of that scandal stuff as well. And then finally one day I got fed up with my boss at the time, and I was like, I'm leaving. I'm done. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. Like I didn't have anything. I just quit.
And you were single at this point? Like,
yeah,
you're still
single by myself. Yep. Still living in... No, actually, I had my own apartment then. But I was totally living on, like, the McDonald's, like, value meal.
Yeah.
No, like, the dollar, like, dollar, you know?
Yeah.
At the time, it was, like, $3 for lunch.
8 carbs. Early 20s.
Yeah. And then, the most random thing happened. I sent an email. So, at the time, I had... One thing that I did start doing with the company is creating an email list. So I transferred everybody that we had in these like printed out contacts to email. And instead of just emailing one person, I started blasting people with like, these are the concerts we're doing. These are the press releases. And so I started to build like a community of people that are expecting to get emails from me. And the list grew and grew and grew to like a couple hundred, and then it got to like 1,000 people because we were doing national.
Yeah.
And so the day that I quit, the one thing that I did was take like a floppy disk
to save it all
of all of my contacts.
That's my biggest regret. Every single job is that I don't save my work.
No, take it all with you. So I took my contacts and I took all of my press clips, which were actual clips at the time.
Wow.
And the next day I got home, like I was at home and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have no job, you know? And so I emailed that same contact list. I blasted everybody and I said, I'm no longer at, you know, the record label and I'm looking for, you know, work. If anyone needs anything in the PR, like creative, advertising, marketing, I listed like a whole bunch of things that I could do by then. Let me know. And then maybe in like 15 minutes, I got like 3 people that had emailed me about like, oh, come do this, come and do this, come and do this. Wow. And it was just from networking and like having done all of these things for the record label, you know. One thing it allowed me to do is just meet a lot of people, like a lot of people in a variety of different ways. And another key lesson for me is that like, you never know in life when something's going to come full circle. Yeah. And so I feel like you have to work with everybody as if at some point they could be your boss, you know?
That's so true.
And so a lot of people that I just crossed paths with or, you know, worked with in passing, but for very short projects like Audrey, like I made sure that I did my very best and I kind of went over and above the amount of work that was asked of me, so that at least they would remember and I would leave some sort of an impact if I needed to go back, And it did help me when I sent out that blast and I said, like, I don't have a job. So it probably in a week I already had like 3 jobs, like 3 freelance types of jobs. And I was doing freelance for a little while, but because of the whole, like, in America, like the healthcare system and all that, like I didn't have insurance or all of that when I was doing freelancing. So I really was looking for like a more serious job, or like at least like a full-time job. And so I started working at Uniworld, which is like an African-American, at the time it was like African-American marketing and advertising. And I think they did PR too, but I was like the only PR person they had. But it was like a really big time for like Puffy and all of these like hip hop artists. And so I think there was like a partnership between Uniworld and like that music space. And so they wanted someone who had done the music space, but could do like African-American and Hispanic. So I really learned a lot about African-American marketing in that space, and like church groups and the importance of the community building. And like I went to the Million Man March. I went to like every single African-American event that there was. And I really learned that, community is community is community is community. So the nuances that you take in from Hispanic and that you think, you're working in this Hispanic space are the same sensitivities and nuances that can be applied to African-American, to LGBT, to Asian. I mean, they each have their own specifics, but at the end of the day, if you're sensitive to that, you're able to adapt and create programs and communication tactics that really resonate with a variety of diverse audiences. And so I really fell in love with like that space, just multicultural as a whole. And then from there, it was like, headhunter calls you, you go to another firm, and I started doing more corporate type work with like a real like PR agency, and I went into like the agency side, and then I realized, wow, like they pay really well. I was like struggling to get by, and then all of a sudden the agencies are offering you pretty good salaries. And you have a team of people, you have clients.
And back then, what was the salary?
So my first agency salary was $45,000, and I thought that was a lot. Like I was like, wow, this is amazing. I could totally live
And what
on
position
this.
was that?
It was an AE.
AE, account executive.
You got paid $45,000?
Yeah. Is that bad or good?
That's good.
I was a double AE, $22,000.
Oh wow. Yeah, but
Wow.
For my first agency job was an AE at 45.
All right, let's be Sabrina.
I know. Well, New York also pays
That's
better.
New York.
New York pays better.
I mean, you couldn't
because
do
the cost of living,
like
the cost of living is so high.
A lot. Like I had to live in New Jersey because I couldn't afford New York, and I would travel back and forth from New Jersey. And I remember it took me like the train schedule was odd, so like I would work until like let's say 10 o'clock at night. I would literally take the train home. It would take me an hour. I'd get home at midnight, and all I would do is get up and go back and do the exact same thing, back and forth from the city. And then I guess after I left, and then I was at this place called DeVries Public Relations. It was an independent firm at the time, but it was all beauty products. Like all they did was beauty. And I think the crazy thing about beauty PR back then, I don't know if it's still that way now, but it was in New York, it was very cutthroat. Like everybody wanted to be in Vogue and in Glamour and, all of these big glossy page long lead books. And so when you had a client in beauty, you were constantly, all you did was pitch. And there was 70 publications that you could go after in the day. So we would sit in pitch meetings, and the director of the account would be like, who did you speak to today? What did they say? And you literally had to go through your pitching list and say, like, I spoke to X person at Vogue. She hung up on me 5 times. We'll call her back. Like, I spoke to this person at Glamour. She said she doesn't want anything to do with the brand. And it was constantly trying to be creative and figure out, like, how do you get to these, like, beauty directors at the time who were beauty and fashion.
And how do you?
And so what we did was just we tried to be creative. And if something
doesn't work,
try again. And I think I also, when I was at the record label, I took a lot of notes about people. Like I felt like if you connected with someone on a personal level, it was much harder for them to like hang up the phone or tell you they're not going to write the story or say something bad.
And now it's easier nowadays, I feel like, because everybody has social accounts.
Yeah, you can see really stock them.
Okay, they're going on vacation. Yep. I can't contact them now, or they love their kids. Let me ask them about their kids.
Exactly. So at the time, time I would make, well, like then when I started to move up, I would make my team have like our pitch calendars with notes in it, like who spoke to them last, what did they say, anything you could grab about their personal life, if they said their kid was sick or if they said they were doing something, like we took notes of all of those things. And so then the next time you talk to them, it was personal and more personal, and then you start to build these relationships, and then it's much easier to get whatever you want done, you know. And I feel like in the beauty, that's when I guess like blogging started, and people started kind of doing their own thing on the digital space too. So you had like, it wasn't as hard to get on the glossies because the space was starting to expand much more beyond that. And then it was kind of like, okay, how do you figure out who's an influencer and who's not? Like there's not really any like Instagram or any kind of social, but there was like blogging. I remember that was like the first thing, you know? So you had to like try to find people's blogs, and then, but there was no way to measure like if they were really big or not. So you kind of had to feel it out and see who else read their blog, and like it was a lot of research.
When did Cision come in? Like, did you ever use Cision or no?
I used Cision when we were at Edelman, but not
and
really.
before Cision there was Burrell's.
Oh, Burrell's Loose.
Loose. Yeah.
Oh my God, we used to get. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
so we
big
used to
books.
get a big envelope. Every day we'd get an envelope in the mail.
But they also had huge books that basically had media contacts. And you had to go in.
The books for the contacts. Yes.
Find the contact and then see. And they had the circulation and the audience. And that's how you found
like
assignments,
a directory.
editors, or is a directory. Like a big.
But then it was always outdated because by the time they printed it changed.
People had moved.
So you guys wouldn't receive it monthly or weekly? It was
it was a yearly. It was yearly.
Yeah, like a directory, which is like so outdated. But even the clips we would get, I remember we would get them in an envelope, and then they would like you open them and dump them on your desk, and then you'd have all of these clips, and you have to go through them. And some of them were just like, it was like I guess it was like a person reading, so they would highlight the word, but then sometimes it was just happened to be the word, but it wasn't really your product.
With the brand.
So you had to actually read through every clip, and there would be like mounds of newspaper. Like
there's no control find.
You had to paste it and then create a clip book. Like from those clips, you'd have to read and monitor it, paste it, and then create a clip book.
So now, like hearing you guys, like all the detailed work that you had
I don't want
to
to hear it.
And then you guys work with us, right? And then we're classified as the millennials, and then you're just like, dude, you have all this stuff in your hands.
Yeah.
Like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, I kind of get that, you know? It's like that frustration of like, we didn't have this, you have this, like.
Now
be more resourceful.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like, you know, it's so funny because when you're talking about it, it sounds like we're from the God knows what time.
But
it was 15 years ago.
Not even.
You know?
Yeah.
And so if I feel like you're abnormally, I mean, I feel like we're both intense, and that's why we like each other, is because we get the levels of intensity, and we are intense about different things. But if there's a patience factor that you feel may be missing from, you know, for those that are listening, from your bosses or your, you know, leadership, it's because, you know, the dues that we pay to get just the basics done, like let alone the promotions or the pats on the back or the new clients, but just to get the basics done. And I think this is probably true for any industry. Technology's advanced so much and made so much more available. The expectation on our end is that it would be faster.
Yeah.
You know, and that it's still complicated and the job is still difficult sometimes, but not comparison to what it used to be.
Well, I guess we got a lot less done in the less time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
it took long.
It was an all day, building a clipping book.
Yeah, totally. Like getting the clips done. You would just have an AE just doing that, just monitoring.
Monitoring used to happen at, like, I would joke, and it's true. Like, Fleischman, thank you for raising me in my early start, but like opening the office at 7 as an intern, and by 8:30, because that's when the account executives would get in, and we called them account executives because they were, you know, AEs on up. Yeah. You had to have whatever industry they were responsible for, whatever client they were responsible for. You had to have different monitoring books on their desk, on their seats, so that when they came in, they could read the news associated with their client or their client industry and be ready. And then you had to fax everything to headquarters. So headquarters could look at the local media and say, here, you know, SBC, which is now AT&T, here's everything that came out in the news today, so that they're ready for what happened. So the monitoring that you do had to be done for us at 8:30, because that's by 8:30, people are responding.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is so crazy.
And then our boss lets us get in at 9.
Well, and I don't need to talk to them until like 10:30. I'm like, guys, figure out, like, have coffee, do your morning, and then let's talk at 10:30.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
No, that won't happen.
Sabrina's not in my book.
Well, different. She was. I was mom. You were dad.
Yeah.
His dad's strict.
Although in my family, my mom is strict. My dad is not,
so how did you guys meet?
So same thing. We met when I was working in the music business, and that's like another example of, you know, kind of thinking outside the box. Like we were just a record label, but we did have access to a lot of artists, and because we were a record label, we also had access to a lot of media contacts, and so. You know, Audrey's client was trying to do a media tour and like an event in New York City. And because we had the access to the contacts and, you know, in the music space, it was really easy for me to book any artist a media tour because I was touring my artists all of the time. Yeah.
So Hennessy brought us together.
Yeah. So we had a client, I think it was Hennessy, and she reached out and was like, hey, you know, do you think you could do this? And I'm like, yeah. And then I went to my president, like the owner, and I'm like, hey, listen, I took this gig and I'm going to do this media tour for another artist, and I think we also booked the venue for you guys.
You did all the logistics,
because we also owned venues in Manhattan at the same time, so we managed a bunch of nightclubs really, and so then we met there and I did the media tour for them and also managed the venue and all of those things, and then that was it. The client, you know, that was the project. It was over, and we probably didn't talk for like 2 years maybe. At the time, Audrey was living in Austin, and then she moved to New York, but we still didn't talk really. No, because you went to another firm, I think.
I was at Latin Works, and and it was also like, I'm from Texas, and so kind of small town, El Paso, Texas. Moved to Austin to go to school. Graduated, wanted to stay here. Like everybody who graduates wants to stay here. And when I had worked at Latin Works, and that was my third job, and I met Sabrina in New York. Like, here's me. And I'd been to New York because I'd done internships in New York, but I don't know that I'd ever been in a limo. And sad because it's the music industry. We were doing a media tour with like an up and coming merengue star and a legend. And Sab had booked, because it's New York and that's what you do, a limo. So I'm in the limo, like just waiting. And then Sab comes in like, hey, how's it going? Like, it's just like, you know, outgoing. You had really like just now, but very curly hair. And just like no barriers. There were no walls, like Canadian nice, you know, as intense as God love her she is. There were no walls. And so it was an immediate kind of like a working friendship. And so when I was at Latin Works, and my boyfriend at the time was graduating grad school in Austin, and he wanted to do New York. I was like, let's go to San Francisco, but he wanted to do New York. And so I'm the one that got the job first. And I always said the most ambitious part of my person is my heart. Like, I never wanted to climb corporate ladders and be anything. I just followed my heart, and that's what took me to New York. So when I was there, I guess 2 years after I got there, I was always with Edelman and traveling to Toronto in another relationship. That sounds awful.
No, it doesn't.
Serial monogamous. Happens. Also traveling to Toronto back and forth because my boyfriend at the time was in Toronto. And so I would go for the weekend and come back on Mondays. And I saw Sab at the airport. And we needed another account supervisor. So.
Yeah, you guys were growing the team there. I think we started with 2. Well, when I joined Edelman,
it's like me and
there was Christina. 2 people, you and Christina. So there was 2 people. And by the time we left 8 years later, there was like 30, maybe 25, 30. Yeah. We started to grow the team, I think, nationally. And so we had people across the country doing a variety of different projects that we were able to finagle. I don't know how. Because with the billing structure and all of the craziness that is corporate PR, it's kind of tough to...
It's like building a business within a business.
Right.
Wow.
And it was awesome. And I am very grateful to Edelman for having given us that leeway and that opportunity, because as much as we were monitored, I don't feel like we were. Like
I think as long allowed to do our own thing. I think that's another, like, I guess lesson too is, you know, as long as we were making money for the company, they kind of let us do what we wanted to do. Yeah. You know, with minor
within reason. Yeah.
Yeah, with minor oversight.
Yeah.
But we got to do a lot of really cool things, and we got to work with a lot of amazing brands.
And to build a really beautiful team that now is at a lot of different agencies around the country. And I feel like the best of the best are people that we got to work with.
Right.
And that Sab trained.
Yeah. I did train them. But yeah, and I think that's the good part about working in an agency and working across a variety of clients is that you get to touch and see different agencies and different clients and see like what you like and what you don't like, you know? And I think that continues to like you hone your skills in a certain direction. So I feel like sometimes when I meet people that have only been in one industry or that have only been in-house, I feel like they're lacking a sense of like understanding how to do a couple of things, multitask. How to juggle things, like from, you know, when you're in an agency, one day you're talking to one client and you're pitching one thing, and the next hour you can be pitching something completely different. And you need to become an expert in that space, otherwise you can't really, if you don't believe it, you can't sell it to somebody else. So here you are, you have maybe sometimes 5, I mean sometimes we had 6, 7, 8 clients, and you are becoming an expert in all of these areas, and you're able to really quickly transition to this and that and this and all these different industries. And
I think even in the heyday with 45 people deep, you know, around the country, the roster was from like Johnson & Johnson to AstraZeneca to Starbucks or Unilever, like from, you know, not necessarily complicated, but disease state type medications for, you know, AIDS to
CPG,
hairspray,
or hairspray, exactly.
and you have to be ready to sell in a way that's credible and mindful and respectful and honest and true. But you have to be ready to own that story and to share that story and to build a deck that completes that story. And so, like, I feel like that's why I would probably never leave agency world. Knock on wood.
Yeah,
because it does give you that. But I can only imagine.
Well, that's the difference that I see, like on the client side. Like, so when I moved from Edelman to NASCAR, then I was in-house. And a lot of the people that had been in-house all their lives. Like, they had never done agency. And I realized very quickly that, like, you just see PR in a completely different way because you are thinking, when you're in an agency, you're like, you're being pushed to come up with a strategy, and then how do you measure that strategy, and then how does that impact the brand, and what's the ROI, and all of these metrics that when you're in-house, like, you're not so worried about that. It's a lot more about internal communications and how do you communicate what you're doing, and how do you know, and sometimes I had a really hard time when I first started balancing between getting the placement. Like, my mind was always in like getting placements, because that's what you do on the agency side. Whereas in the in-house side, they were very much about how do we communicate to the rest of the employees this, like, what we're doing, and how can we ensure that the employees don't hear, you know, about something after the press. And it was all about like managing kind of the communications and the flow of the company. And if that came at the expense of a clip or a placement, they would always put the emphasis on the company and making sure everybody like in the company feels well, which is also another aspect that you don't get when you're on the agency side. Because sometimes you're like, if I'm doing all of this, like, what does this person do? You know? And now I realize, wow, like my day is full, but I'm still, I mean, I still now, like in this current job, I pitch a lot of media, but before, like, you know, we spent a lot of time creating plans and creating the strategic direction and all of the messaging and training people and all of these other things. And we barely did the pitching. Yeah. And so sometimes it's kind of like, how do you balance the two so that you're still kind of getting the placements and the coverage, but at the same time making sure that like everything within the company is harmonious and everybody's communicating properly and everybody up and down the chain has heard from you, which is, it's difficult because in your mind you're like, I just want the placement, you know, and then there's like 3, you know, days of stuff you need to do before you can even get to the interview. Yeah.
But I feel like we had good trainers like Marisol.
Oh yeah,
because she would do that. She would, our Unilever client, that because of the team's work became our Time Warner Cable client, and she would kind of, in the same way that Kimber does, like you have to socialize a strategy to make sure people buy in and ask questions before you get to actually execute. Yeah. So we had some good training at least for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I feel like everybody we worked with, you know, taught us something or. everybody we worked with gave us like, I mean, think of all the people that were our clients, like Howard Schultz, like, I mean, we've had the privilege to work with a lot of amazing executives and a lot of brands that have done really amazing things. And I think that allows you to like take little bits and pieces of what worked well. And then it changes so much and so fast that sometimes you have to forget all of that and say, okay, that was 3 years ago. It doesn't matter now. Now is about this, and kind of identifying those trends and training your brain to think about what's next, and okay, what's the next idea? Like, how are we going to get to this place, or what are we going to come up with to like put all of this together and create something that people are going to care about. And I think the other part of what I really like about sports is that I remember when I was working on hairspray or soap or toothpaste, and you're pitching, media, and you're like stressed out, and you're, trying to get this placement, and then at the end of the day,
sexy something about like,
and then at the end of the day, you get home, you're like, oh my God, I am all day talking about toothpaste. Like, this can't be my life, like you have these moments, and then you have to like pull yourself out of that and try to figure out. And I think that pushes you to be creative in a way that people who, let's say when you work in sports, there's an inherent passionate fan that's always with you. You don't have to get anybody excited about any sport. They're just there. So people who've only worked in that space, they don't know what it's like to pitch toothpaste or deodorant or anything, condoms. I mean, we had it all. We had every single brand you can think of.
Sorry, this is a sidebar. I had a childhood friend from elementary, middle school, and then high school call me, and she's like, I just saw your name on a press release for Trojan condoms. She was a lawyer, and I'm like, what is my life? I called Manny DeVries because it was Hispanic PR Wire or whatever, and I'm like, do me a favor, please take that release down. Like, I have people Googling me from high school that are seeing me on, and I wasn't ashamed of the work. I was just like, I've done more than that, and if that's what's bubbling up, that's not what I want to do. But spanning the gamut from Trojans to technology.
But it makes you creative, and it makes you resilient, And I think sometimes when people have these brands that you walk into that people are naturally passionate about, they don't know what it's like to have to push something that people, like that you have to create a whole campaign around just to get noticed,
So,
but it makes you more creative.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So in PR, I feel like you always have to take care of your own and then help everybody else take care of themselves in some way. So as women, I feel like we do that out in our careers and then outside of our careers. So how do you juggle, especially you went through being a single mom. I don't know, are you still a single mom? Yeah. So how did you do your job, single mom, then you're like a daughter, a sister, or a friend, colleague? Like, how do you juggle all that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's like a secret sauce. I think you just have to do what you can do every day and do your best and kind of let it.
How do you deal with the guilt?
I just
posted something amazing last night. You need to see it. Did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah.
But can I just talk about you for a second?
Yes.
In that way, I feel like we said we weren't going to cry.
No, yeah, that's why
I feel like Cuba Gooding Jr. on Jerry Maguire. I'm not going to cry. But you talk about, chances are if you're in PR, this is something that felt very natural to you. So we probably are the good daughters in the sense that, and it's not that our sisters weren't great. It's just that we noticed details and we cared about how people felt. We cared about the execution, whether it's family parties or birthday gifts.
And connecting people.
And there was a sense of opportunity based on something that felt natural. Yeah. So Sab and what I've seen, because I do believe she's trained an industry. Like, my job was easy. I got to build a team, and the team built the business. And we did it together, and I was, a part of it, but it wasn't me. It was all of us. But Sab, I feel like, has the level of expectation based on, she's already done the work, right? Like, there's not a briefing book that she hasn't built. If she expects it, we used to deliver briefing books. So you guys, very easy on us. We used to deliver briefing books to our clients before they got on a plane. So you would have to get it at their door so that when they got on the plane, they knew exactly what was happening. All the materials were
no
finalized.
favor.
No favor, no email,
sometimes we sent our account executives in a car service to the person's house before they got in the plane.
Wow.
If there was a media list before we pitched, and we do this now, but like she would go and mark it up. I'm like, she's not there anymore. Do your homework. She's not there anymore. Do your homework. Or that person left and they're now here. Do your homework. And it's like, I feel like the level of input that you had as a professional is because you did the work. And the level of input that you have for your son, like Sebastian was our date, you know,
all the time.
he would come out and just so respectful and so kind, but he was, and I feel like this is probably something of working with Latinas, because I don't know that would have happened, or multiculturals, because I don't know that would have happened if we were in a different shop.
Right.
We embraced family so much that she didn't have to separate the mom Sabrina from the work life Sabrina. It was just all encompassing. And I don't feel like you made that separation. Like when you needed to leave, you left.
Yeah.
Because Seb was everything. And I feel like it was an incredible example for me. And I think for everybody that worked with you, it's just like you took care of all the details and you didn't let anything slip. And your son was your priority, but your clients never felt that you weren't available, and your team never felt that you weren't available. Because I feel like it's just like this Wonder Woman mom strength. And I see it in my sister. And I see it in most mothers of just like, there's this whole other battery pack that they get upon becoming a mom that is selfless. And so.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I mean, obviously I was much younger, so I had much more energy. I think if I had to do it now, I don't know, like if I would be able to, but I would just like, I think I was able to bring him with me a lot. So I traveled with him wherever I had a shoot. I mean, he sat in the audience at Sábado Gigante. He came with me one time. We were shooting at Sábado Gigante, and we had these it's like crazy things, but we had these like mayonnaise jars that everybody had to pull out from under their seats.
The first integrations
with Sábado Gigante.
Oh, even with Univision.
Hellmann's.
Yeah.
It was Hellmann's. And
like all the segments that Uni does or they did, that was...
We had, so we had this shipment of mayonnaise. So imagine there's like 250 seats inside the studio, and everybody was supposed to get the Hellmann's. And then when we get there, they had delivered Hellmann's and not Hellmann's Light, or maybe it was Hellmann's Light and not Hellmann's. So there was like 2 hours before the show goes live, and I'm like, oh my God. And my son was with me because I thought we were just going to go there, sit down, and watch this integration happen. Like that's what I thought the extent of my role was going to be. And then we get there, and the producer's like freaking out. He's like, Sabrina, I think we have the wrong mayonnaise, whatever. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get 200 jars of mayonnaise right now? So then I'm like, okay, don't worry, like I'm gonna go. And we had a relationship with HEB, which is one of the distributors that, you know, so I literally I knew by then, because we had done so many segments, I knew where to purchase, like where they had these specific products. So I went to like 7 HEBs with my son. At the time he was like 5, and he was like seeing me freak out. He was like, oh my God, let's go. So we literally went to every HEB and cleaned out the shelves. And we got to 250 jars of mayonnaise and came back. And then, you know, the producers helped, and we put them all under the seat, and we were able to do it. But then like maybe 2-3 years after that, whenever my son saw Hellmann's, he would be like, oh, do you remember when we had to go buy, you know, these jars of Hellmann's to put under the seat? It was hilarious. But so I traveled with him all, like he came with me, or sometimes if I had to go for like a week or something, my mom would come too. And she would stay with me in the hotel, and then he would stay, and I would just go work and then come back for the weekend for like the evening shift. And then as he got older, I just brought him with me to like studio shoots or whatever. I mean, he was pretty quiet and self-sufficient, and he was used to being around like the sets and things like that we got to do. And then, like whenever we had client dinners or anything, I brought him with me, and like all the people in the office knew him. I used to like let him sit in other people's offices if I had to do a meeting, and they would entertain him. He would go from like desk to desk. And it takes a village. I mean, it was all of the girls that worked with us, plus like my parents, sometimes my sister, his father, like all of, you know, everybody. And I would still leave at 5 work, and then I would go home, make dinner, you know, put him to bed at 8:30, and then I would just go back online. Like everyone knew by 9 o'clock, like from 9 to midnight, I would be back, you know, so I would take a barrage of emails. Yeah. And then, you know, I also think like you have to be respectful to those people as well. Like I was on my own schedule, and I think, you know, people sometimes felt like, oh, like I start sending emails at 9, and so everyone needs to work at 9. Yeah. And I think it was like, you know, I explained to them like, no, like you don't have to respond at 9. You can respond the next day, but this is when I'm getting all of my emails out, you know? And then I learned that you could time emails. So then I started timing them so they would not go out until the next day at like 7.
Yeah.
And then that way they wouldn't feel like, oh my God, like my boss is emailing me at midnight, even though I still would, like we worked really, really hard. And I think like sometimes things were tough, and it's hard to raise that many people through the ranks. And I think a lot of the people we started with started as interns and moved their way up. And as they moved their way up, we wanted to make sure that they had like all the skills necessary. And I think we taught them not only like PR, but also like finance and how to manage a budget and how to manage our internal process. Like, how do you make money off of this?
Like AEs were looking at budgets.
And
we wanted
finance
to expose
reports.
Wow.
And I think that helped them better manage the business.
Yeah.
Because when you understand that your hours are billed and why you need to enter your time, and why, this costs this much for this client, and then we have different rates for different clients and different brands depending on different things. I think it helps you better prioritize your time. It helps you understand how the business works and how to function within that business. And then, if later you want to do your own thing, or if later you want to go lead a team,
you have those skills,
you understand the finance of it as well. So I don't think anyone walked away from our team not understanding all of those elements of the business. So it wasn't just about the client, it was also about just like yourself and learning yourself, becoming better at everything that you did, and being able to have skills that were transferable in everything that you do.
And also another question that I had, so if you're in a leadership position and as a woman you have to speak up a lot of times, how do you speak up and not have those sorry if I came across too harsh moments, and not seem like a bitch?
I'm probably the worst person to ask that to, because I don't apologize for that.
Because you don't apologize for that?
No.
You just deliver it.
But here's the thing, I guess. So I want to answer that because I feel like it's unfortunate that we have to apologize for being strong.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that we have to think twice about how we say something or the energy with which we say it. We had a colleague, remember, that got called out at one point in her career for being aggressive. And it's like, because she was talking with her hands. And it's like, no, you just don't understand the culture, and that she's part Italian, and that's how Italians speak.
I mean, that happens to me all the time.
and just being misunderstood. And I feel like this is an unfortunate thing about corporate America, not any one particular organization or institution. I think it's just, or the institution of corporate America, is that, diversity is a fairly new concept, right? The 60s, civil rights, American economy, the way we know it now in terms of the industrial age and what it created in terms of corporations and companies, and corporate America in and of itself is fairly new. Yeah. So to have women in the ranks at senior levels is a fairly it's also just being mindful of the position that we hold and what we've been asked to do, and our response or responsibility in the institutions that we serve, representing diversity. I've always been abnormally mindful of. My dad told me this when I was a little kid, like, you're going to have to run faster and jump higher than anyone else because of what you look like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's not sad, it's not hard, it's not heavy, but just be better than everybody. Mm-hmm. And so, like, all right, so I'm going to do that. I'm trying to figure that out. And so the expectation that I think I placed on myself, the expectation that I know Sab placed on herself, like, we had to be better than our peers. Yeah. Not because they weren't good, but because we knew we were going to get questioned at different levels. And by the time we said something, and I feel bad about this, because I feel like we were misunderstood. It wasn't anger. We were passionate about the work. We were passionate about the teams. We were passionate about ideas. And I feel like, depending on the audience, that could be misperceived. And someone said it when I was working with him, and he was a really smart British guy. I had a crush on him. You remember? He said, and I'm okay with that. I'll own it. I totally had a crush on him. I won't say his name, but I totally had it was like a work crush. Yeah. Because he was so smart. And I feel like I prize smarts over anything, smarts and humor. Which is why I like Jack Black. But anyway, he said, it's so unfortunate because everything you say about, multiculturalism and diversity is right on. But when you say it, you're an angry brown woman. And when I say it, I just sound like I'm international and global. because he has a British accent. So everything he says sounds smarter. It's like when you talk about women having to tone it down and be mindful, it's like, not just do we have to do that because we're women, we have to do that because we're ethnic women or women of color. And it's just, I think it's the reason that I haven't looked for a regular job, because I don't want those, like, I'm proud of my passion. Yeah. I'm proud of the fact that I'm going to cry and I'm going to get heated. I'm going to turn red. Like, if I feel it, I'm going to say it. I don't want those barriers placed on me. And I feel like, you know, it's not that we're always right. It's just, we have nothing to apologize for saying what we say. It's just unfortunate that until we're there, we're not there. So right now, if it comes off across as aggressive, then so be it. And I always ask you guys, like, was I aggressive?
Yeah.
You know?
But
like,
you shouldn't.
But I do, because you know, there's part of me is probably reeling from my old experience. Yeah. Of, you know, in my reviews, I got called preachy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's like, it's like a balance too, you know, it's like, I think that it's a misunderstanding of like interpreting passion for
aggression
or disrespect or something. I don't know. But at the same time, you just like you want people to appreciate your nuances, I think you have to appreciate others. Definitely. And so then it's like finding that balance where like you're not offending anyone, but at the same time you're able to execute and do what you need to do. And I think the best way to do that is by showing it, not saying it. So like making your work excellent, doing the best that you can, and like letting the work speak for itself. I think that's what I've learned like over the last couple of years is like, you know, not speaking less and doing more. And not like, you know, voicing your opinion and providing all of this kind of additional information when you can just, you know, understand what the task is, get the idea, create the idea, and then execute on it, and then let that speak for your passion or your idea or your creativity. Like, let the work come out instead. I feel like that's just worked better for me now, having been in these like very undiverse environments, whether it's, you know, NASCAR, sports, or men, or even tech. I mean, the tech industry is, you know, very white male. Yeah. And so you kind of had to adapt to those things as well. I think specifically when we had our own team, it was all, you know, it was all brown women, maybe a couple of brown, a couple of boys. But in that instance, I don't think it was like a boy-girl thing, like being a female. In that instance, I do think it was, you know, a lack of all of us believing that everybody had the best intentions for each other. Yeah. And I think back to the last interview we had and how he says, like, he sees everybody, you know, through love. Through the best intentions. Yeah. And I feel like if you see people that way, then that's what, you know, you'll get back. Yeah. And I feel like we were moving, sometimes, you know, you move very quickly and there's a lot going on, and, you know, you might misinterpret something as malintentioned when it's really not. It's just like, oh, you're short, or you're just busy, or you're doing all these things.
In key learnings, I don't feel like we had, I mean, we were navigating a very big industry and a very big company, and I know we had a lot of mentors, and some of them outside those roles, but you know, the things that I learned that I would have done differently, there wasn't a fight. There was no fight to be fought. You know, I put on gloves because I felt like I had to champion, or I had to rally, or I had to do something, but no one was coming at me. You know, and to Sabrina's point, if we would have showed the work, and we did in a lot of cases, overshowed the work to make sure that we were seen. But I feel like maybe for your generation, you don't have to work so hard to be seen. You just let the work speak for itself. Yeah. And that's going to be the loudest voice. Because I mean, a key learning is that we probably, you kind of lead with your own story. And so if you feel like you're the Lone Ranger and you're the one trying to carry the good torch and fight the good fight, then the assumption is, wrongly so, that everybody is against you. And I'll totally admit this. And I think I admitted it to my old boss of like, you know, I was fighting because I thought I had to. And you don't have to do that. And I think my advice to you guys is, to Sabrina's point, let the work speak for itself, but assume assume that you don't have to fight anymore.
Yeah.
Just know that you have that role. Know that you have that position. And I tell you guys all the time, like, trust your gut. I can guide you and I'll say yes, but trust your own gut. Because I'm always wrong if I'm telling you don't do something that you feel you need to do. And if you deny your own instinct time and time again, you're going to lose it.
Yeah, that's true.
So
kind of just to wrap this up, because I know we have limited time. What is one piece of, like, either a book, a person that you look and seek for inspiration?
I really enjoy, it's weird. I look at men actually a lot. I really love like Mark Zuckerberg. I love everything he does. I did read Lean In. I liked that book. I thought it was, interesting in terms of the things that she was able to then turn around and give back. I feel like as women, we don't do that enough in terms of helping other women succeed. I feel like in my experience, I've actually had men help me more than women, which is unfortunate. And every time I feel like I think a woman is going to help me, they end up not helping me.
Yeah.
And
present company excluded.
So, well, I mean like, for whatever reason, it just never works out that way. And I've yet to find like a female mentor that like has kind of remained. Meanwhile, I have a ton of male mentors that I can go to anytime, and I feel like they're genuinely, interested in providing information, or like I have questions about whatever it is I'm doing. I have a pretty solid network of, actually, I was trying to think, all white men mentors, which is also unfortunate. It's not that I don't seek out other people, it's just that I just don't get the same feedback from them, which is odd. But yeah, I really like to see, I love Howard Schultz. I think he's an amazing, what he's been able to do with the company, and just, I like the rags to riches stories. Like, you start from nothing and you've been able to do this, you build this in a really thoughtful and meaningful way, and also give back, in a variety of other ways, not just through your business, but philanthropically, mentoring, education, a variety of different things. And so I those are kind of the people that I really like, religiously follow, like everything that they do. I think I love Paulo Coelho, which she knows, but that's more just, I feel like that's more like
life,
spiritual kind of guidance, existential, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And what about a song? Your favorite song right now?
Right now?
Yeah.
I'm really into Selena Gomez. Is that
really?
Weird? Yeah, I love her. I think she's going through this thing now with just because of the whole Justin Bieber Weekend thing. So I just love her lyrics. I think they're awesome. Nice. But I'm also like a Taylor, like I like a lot of different music, but I'm really into lyrics, like really hardcore into lyrics.
Gotcha. Cool. And you, Audrey?
Song-wise or mentors?
But well, inspiration and then song.
I feel like I'm in a reverse mentorship mode of like, I know the greats, I've seen the greats, and I'm really, blessed to have people close and far that I can look up to, but I feel like where I'm getting the most of my inspiration is from you guys. Like the next gen. I feel like so much without having been exposed to so much. So it's like, what do you get to do, and how can I be a part of that? So I feel like you guys are my inspiration. My only mission is
we love you.
No, I love you too. But my only drive is to open as many doors as possible, to let you know everyone I know, and to expose you to as much as I can, and let you go forward and do what you can do. I think Sab and I both read Paulo Coelho, and we have different interpretations of the ends of books, which is interesting. Yeah. She reads them in English or in Spanish. I read them in English, and then we're like, "What? That's not how it happened." And there's still debates going on to the day. But I feel like inspiration is everywhere if you're looking for it.
Yeah.
And everyone, no matter education level or success level, like your parents, your family members, your friends, your colleagues that have become family. In terms of music, I'm a little bit of an indie person.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of random music. But lately, I feel like Jim James. Yeah. My Morning Jacket. But I just saw him in concert, so I'm a little starstruck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, guys.
This is so good. So this is another episode, so be on the lookout for another one. Thank you.
Yeah, part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
Part 2, for sure.
All right. Bye.
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 We'll call the part 2 red wine.